This is going to be the video tutorial for section number 2 of the Ruby Satchel bag. In this section, we are going to assemble our flap with the piping, as well as our front and back pockets, and then we will assemble the front and back pocket assembly, where you will be placing your flap on top of your pockets. So what we're going to do right off the bat is we're going to start with our flap section right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move aside my lining and my foam, and I'm going to concentrate on showing you how to make your piping and apply it to the front exterior portion of your flap. Now I have moved aside the lining portion as well as the foam that's going to be required, and I've kept my piping piece and my cording as well as my front exterior of my flap. I'm just going to set that up here for now so that we can talk about the piping. Now, I am using more vinyl from Emmeline, and in this video, I used leather in the actual pattern. What you want to make sure you have for your piping is a piping that's very, very thin and not too thick. You want to keep it fairly, if you're using leather, 1.5 ounces. So if you're using a thick leather, you need to skive it back. If you're using vinyl, you need to cut this on the bias. So you can see that stretch right there. That's extremely important to make the curves around your flap area. Now, if you're using leather, you can actually completely cover this with glue if you wish, but the Rowley's fringe adhesive that I use generally for all of my patterns does not work with vinyl. So I'm going to need to use an Elmer's rubber cement to connect my piping together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a thin layer, it's all gooping out here, a thin layer of rubber cement along the wrong side all the way down of that piping. I'm going to make sure I don't get any on my front area, so I'll just move that out of the way a bit, just like that. I'll go ahead and apply this all the way down. As you can see, it's a very, very thin coat. And then I'm going to let this dry until it's tacky, which should only take a few minutes. So I will come back after it's dried, and I will show you how we need to apply the cording in place. So now my rubber cement has dried enough so that it's tacky. You can see it's a little bit tacky there. Now, something to be aware of is that when you use rubber cement, you first of all need to use a well-ventilated area because there is an odor to it. And also you need it to be tacky in order for it to bond, because if it's wet, it will not bond together. Now I've gone ahead and I've placed center on the wrong side of this piping and center on my piping cord itself. So I'm just going to lay that down right in the middle of that piping that I cut, so you can see how well it's just sticking to it. And I'm going to fold this over in place so that it encases the piping cord in between the layers of the piping, the strip of piping. I'm going to take my poly roller. I'm going to make sure I get right into that area right there just to hold it down. The great thing also about rubber cement is that it's repositionable. So if you make a mistake, you can pull it back and then reconnect it again. Go all the way down here. And I use my poly roller and I push the cording right into that area to form the lip, just like that, right into here. You can use a bone folder if you wish as well. I just use a poly roller because it really gets it nice and tight in there. Now I need to mark center on the lip of my piping cord, so I'm just going to fold that in half, and I'm just going to place a mark just like that so I know that that is center. Now we need to apply this piping, so you go this way, on the area right through here of our flap. but I want to adhere it. Now I can use glue here, but I'm going to use a 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape instead. It's not going to affect my stitching at all. It'll be right out of the area that I need it to be, but it helps it hold really, really well. So I'm just going to go all the way around the area on the right side of that exterior flap. All the way up until you get to the other side, just like that. I'm going to take my poly roller and I'm going to make sure that that double-sided tape is well secured to the exterior of that flap, just like that. Now you remember these marks that you drew here, that placement marks for your piping, those are very important at this point. So now we're going to place this piping on here, but you need to do some snipping in order to make it fold and mold beautifully into these corners. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull away my double-sided tape first of all, and there we go. And then I'm going to align my center mark on the exterior with the center mark on my piping so that these edges, raw edges, are even. I'm just going to go about this far on both sides because I know I have to do some snipping to make it mold to the corner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to snip all the way around, even up to the top, so that everything molds beautifully around this corner. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to do my snipping now. And when you snip this, you want to snip approximately 1/4 of an inch into the lip and keeping the snips around 1/8 of an inch away from each other. So now you can see I have snipped all the way along here, right up to this top edge here on this side, as well as on this side, as you can see, just like that. That will really help everything mold beautifully into this flap. So now I'm going to begin placing this around here. I have also added a little bit of double-sided tape, 1/8 of an inch along here and along here up to that mark to help hold that bend in place. So I'm just going to go along here and I'm going to align the edge of the lip of the piping. As you can see, it's nice and spread, so it's molding beautifully around here, all the way up till I get to about this point right here. And then I'm going to bend this around because that is where I need that piping to stop. So I want to bend it around that corner. Now, if you have a little bit of bulk there, what I would suggest you do is to remove just a little bit, like a little triangle, and bend it back again, just like that. And you can take your poly roller if you want, if you feel that it's kind of moving on you, just to get it nice and perfect. So you want it to kind of angle out like that. I'm going to do the same thing to this side over here, just nicely molding that right around the corner till I get to about this point right here, and then I'm going to bend this around. I have this amount right here that I need to remove, so I'll bring that back and I'll just kind of make a little bit of a triangle here, cut out just like that, so that it bends a lot easier on that corner. Come around and bend just like that, and the side pieces are holding everything in place just like that. Now I'm not going to stitch this because it's well secured and it's well glued in to this area, so it's not going to shift on me when I go to my sewing machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my lining piece right here and I'm going to place this on top. Now this flap I am doing is going to have the Bringberry plaid lock on it, so I'm not going to be placing a magnetic snap on here. If you're going to add a magnetic snap, you need to go to the pattern and follow the instructions on how to do that. You need to place your mark and add a piece of stabilizer, whether it be bag stiffener or something like that, in order to add some stability behind that. So you need to do that before you put all of this together. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to grab some clips, and I'm going to align my center mark right down here with the center mark of my piping. And I'm going to clip that together, and I'm going to come up here and make sure everything is nice and even. I'm not going to clip the sides up here. I'm just going to line the lining with the piping, making sure it's all nice and even and there's no puckers or everything fits just perfectly. And then I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to stitch this piping in place using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So you can feel that piping right in here. I generally use a welt foot or a piping foot on my machine. So if you have only a zipper foot, something that might be helpful to you is you can feel that area there. So you may want to just do this. Make sure, though, that whatever fabric you are working with, that's not going to come through. This is a pen. I'm using black fabric, I know. So I'm going to go to the machine, and I'm actually going to stitch this just like that. So I'm kind of drawing this around here. So there's the top of my piping right here. That there's nothing in here. There's no cording in here because the cording stops right here. So I'm just going to start here. I'm going to come all the way around as close as I possibly can. And I'm going to draw a line over here so that I know exactly where I'm following as well, just like that. So it's easier to maneuver your machine if you have a line to follow. So I'm going to go to the machine. I'm going to stitch this on, and I'm not going to stitch my sides, nor am I going to stitch my top. I'm only securing the piping in that area right there. So I'll go to the machine and we will get that stitched together. So as you can see, I am using a piping or a welt foot, and it has this little bit of a curvature in here, so it actually clears that piping. It's a really great thing to have if you are doing a lot of piping. So I would advise you find a foot that for your machine that is specific for this, because it makes the job a lot easier. Now I'm going to completely go all the way around this whole piece, and I'm going to check to see if I'm close enough, and if I'm not close enough, I'm going to do a second pass to make sure that I get really close to my piping. So I'm back from the machine, as you can see, and I've had to make a couple of passes here because I didn't get close enough, especially in this curve right in here. So you want to make sure you get nice and tight into that area. Now at this point, I want to get rid of that excess piping over here at the side. So you just snip that away, just like that. Just get rid of that. And we need to trim this seam allowance back. So you just want to come along here and take maybe about half of the amount off. So your seam allowance was, I do believe, around 3/8 of an inch. So you just want to take about 1/4 of an inch off, leaving about 1/8 of an inch. Go all the way around. Now you have trimmed off that excess right in there, and before you turn it to the other side, you're going to need to put your foam on your flap. So you want to retrieve your piece AA, which is your peel and stick adhesive foam. I'm going to peel off the back of this foam, just like that. Now, once again, if you don't have the adhesive foam, you need to glue this in place using either a rubber cement, or you need to apply that carpet tape is awesome because that gives it a nice sticky feel. This is the closed cell foam, which I love to use, but it's not in the seams, so it's only adhered to this area, securing with the adhesive. So you want to take this curved top edge right here, and you want to align that with the top, keeping everything centered and within your seam allowance, just like that. and then you're going to poly roll it so that it's well adhered and in place. Just like that. And then now I'm going to turn this so that the right side is out, being very careful not to put a lot of pressure on your seam there. So I'm just going to push it from the bottom, just like this, kind of bending that in so that I don't put pressure on there. And this is what your flap should now look like. You have your lining piece here and your piping as well as your exterior. Now, if you're going to add your magnetic snap, that's when you're going to put your holes in, set it in place, and just fold over in this area right in here. You can also do it earlier if you wish. If you're going to put a logo on the front of your bag, now's the time also you would need to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give this a bit of a hammering. I'm going to bring my piping out to the side, just like that. And I'm just going to give it a bit of hammering all the way through to make sure it's well secured. So there you have it. This is your flap. And as I said, I'm going to be using this lock. So it's going to be placed on the bottom edge right here. You should not have your side stitched, your top stitch, or over here. There's your foam right there. So it's nice and secured in place. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set this piece aside, and I'm going to then move on to my front pocket assembly. So I'll go get my pieces and we'll begin putting the pockets together.